In the top view, if I do this, you can look at the grid marks. Okay, we really didn't talk much about the grid, but the grid can be really helpful when modeling things. And you'll notice here I've got a simple plane. Could have been a cube, but I shaved off all the other faces anyway and then extruded what I wanted. So this time I started with a plane, and I made it in approximately the shape that I thought I would need, sort of that elongated sort of rectangle. But you'll notice I didn't make it directly to the edge of the grid. And that was for a reason. Because I know I'm going to want some metal up here and metal on the bottom and metal on the sides, this allows me a way to kind of measure out what I want. So I'm going to use each one of these center lines, here, 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 and here, to divide out the 6 holes that I want. Okay? And you can change the grid spacing actually if you go up to the display menu and you go to the grid option box. By default it's set to 10. You can set that to 12 if that would be helpful. You could set it to 20 if you were doing something really that needed some really specific snapping. But then your grid space snapping is much more specific, so you'd have the ability to do that. You could take this down altogether and barely have any grid points, if that would be helpful. I'm going to leave it at 10 because that gives me 3 holes on, or 3 unit spaces on each side here, and that's going to work out great to get my 6 bases. Okay, so let's start cutting some holes. So I'm going to go down, hold down the Shift key, and right-click and go into the Insert Edge Loops tool. So like I said, I'm going to use this grid space on each one of these as sort of a center mark. So it's not exact, but let's say something like this, and then something like this, and something like that. Okay? And again over here, maybe something like that. So this will be the width of the outside bars. And again, I want this to be the center line for my 6. So what I'm going to do is select over here like that and kind of put the same width on either side of these. That's probably not going to be exact because I'm kind of doing this by eye, but a lot of the toys that were handmade in the 1960s and 70s and even back, certainly back to the 50s, were sort of hand machined, or at least initially hand machined before they went into production line. So a lot of the spacing and a lot of the parts necessarily weren't absolutely exact. Certainly they didn't have computer laser cutting back then. So a little bit of character, a little bit of offness actually adds to the authenticity of your model. But in this case, as you can see now, and I'm going to hit Q to get out of that mode, I have the 6 holes, or I will have the 6 holes that I'm going to want. So hit 5 to get into shaded mode. I'm going to right click and get down to faces. What I'm going to do here is select the holes that I want to punch out and just delete them. So this is the basis of my model, and this is going to be a really good place to start. If you remember, what we did was we extruded out these holes. Okay, so we're just going to hold down Shift and grab these, and let's punch in a little bit so you can see these holes. Okay, then I'm going to Shift right click, go to the Extrude tool, and extrude that down. Now we've used snapping for pivot points. We used it in that example of snapping 2 street sections together. You also have the ability, when you're doing something like an extrude, to snap to vertices or grid points. In this case, I'm going to just snap because we're kind of intentionally floating slightly above the ground plane. I'm going to snap all of these edges down to the ground plane by holding the X button, grabbing that arrow, and just sort of wiggling it a little bit. And then now they all snap nicely down to the bottom edge. Alrighty, and next thing I'm going to want to do is double click on the outside, and I'm going to pick up the entire rim here, and I could either right click, Shift right click again to get it to extrude, but it was the last tool that I selected, so if you tap G, it will repeat the last tool that you selected. Alright, so we have the ability now to just drag these down, and I'll hold X, select that one arrow, and just pop that so that that goes straight down. So now we got a nice clean piece of geometry, at least to start with. So let's take a look at that. And if we smooth it, and I will, it's going to look like that. So that's not very helpful at this stage, but we're going to get be able to do a lot more with that. So at this phase now, and I don't really need to do this, but sometimes, especially when you've been doing cuts and extrudes, it's often wise to just go into vertex mode, select all your vertices, and then just shift right click. Up here at top, you have these options for merge vertices, and sometimes it just helps to do a merge vertice. And then at that point, you know that you've got nice clean edges and spaces, and that if you look here now as I smooth this even looks a little bit smoother, and I think that just helps sometimes. Okay, over here, this is our construction history, and as you can see, it's starting to get pretty long. In general, once we're sure that we have a good base in a model and it's clean, we want to delete the history whenever possible. So what I'm going to do is go over here, and I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And now all of that goes away, and now I have a nice model. It's lighter and easier to work with in memory, and it's going to give us a cleaner build. Okay, so we have more edge loops to insert to kind of start to structure how this object smooths. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a couple of the edge loops that we are definitely going to want to need. So I'm going to hold down Shift, Edit, and go Insert Edge Loops. I'm probably going to want one down here at the bottom, so do something like this. Not too tight to the bottom, it can be fairly tight, something like that. Probably going to want one up here, but again, I like that kind of soft feel that you have on the edge of the robot, so I'm not going to go too soft. And you can always pull the edge or slide the edge to make it harder if it didn't be hard enough. But what I'll do here now is I'm going to do the same thing, something like that, and go on this edge here, and something like that. Okay, I'll go to this side, and we'll do the same. We'll just select this, and we'll do something like that. And that's real. I think that's going to give us a nice exterior edge. As a matter of fact, if we look at that now, and we hit Q to get out of the object, if we look at the exterior edges now, I think the exterior edge is looking pretty good. Okay, what we have in the middle here is it's very soft and squishy because there's no edge support whatsoever kind of supporting anything in there. So the next thing we're going to do is add some more edge loops, but we're going to add them to the interior. I mentioned to you guys the other day that there was an alternate way to do this. Remember, we went into edge loop mode, and I was inserting all of these manually. I put one here, and then we were going to put one here, and that's perfectly valid. That works. But I did mention to you that there was another tool that would be more efficient and effective when you have a lot of geometry to cut. And the name of that tool is the Cut Face tool, and you find that up here in the Edit Mesh menu, and it's right down here, and it's called the Cut Face tool. Okay, so we're going to use that. So I'm going to hold down the space bar, and I want to go into the top view. Okay, so what the Cut Face tool is going to do is I'm just going to pick a point that I want the edge to go across, and it will literally just zizz completely across the object the entire way, in and out of all of these face sections. When you're using it and you want to use it sort of exactingly, you're best to hold down the Shift key. That constrains it to 45-degree cuts. Okay, so this will make sense just when you see it. So I'm going to hold down Shift and right click, and the Cut Face tool is right over here at 2 o'clock. Alright, so what happens is, and I'm going to hold down Shift so you can see it, I'm going to pick something not too close because I want this a little bit rounded. Maybe something like this. And this line appears, and if you're holding down Shift, you'll feel it snapping at 45-degree angles. And I want it to be straight, so then I'm going to release the button, and what it does is give me those cuts all the way across. The way faster doing it this way than doing it one by one, which I showed you the other day. Next one, hold down Shift again and snap it, and again we get all of those cuts, which is terrific. So we have more cuts to do, but I would like you to take a look at the result of this. So as we're adding in our edge loops, you're actually seeing the progress on the smoothing. So now we're at this point, okay, and I'm going to hit smooth. Okay, so we're definitely squarer than we were, But we really don't have a lot of definition. I mean, this is kind of soupy looking here. If you look at the exterior where we're picking up a nice bit of light here, the interior, all of this is really sort of mushy looking. So we probably want this squarer than that. So if you look at this in here, we were able to pick up highlights, and it definitely has a slightly sharper bid to it. So we're going to need a little bit more geometry, and I'm going to drop back down to number 1 in the proxy. And what we're going to do is I'm going to add my edge loops inside these bars here, and I think this is going to give us a nice look, and I think you're going to like the result. So anyway, shift right click and go back in for the insert edge loops. And again, what we're going to do is just go to the outside of this one right here, about the same distance as over there. That way we can kind of keep a consistency in the softness. All right, and we'll do that about here. And we'll do this about here. Something like that. And here, like this. And like this. And like this. And like that. Okay. And we'll do that there. And I could be clicking anywhere along here, it doesn't really make a difference. It's just going to reach across all the faces that are connected and give you pretty much exactly what you would want. So now our widths are looking pretty good, and I don't think we're really going to need much more geometry. I have one more in mind that I'd like to do, and maybe I'm going to add it, which would be to this interior, but we'll take a look at it first. So I'm going to hit Q to get out of the edge loop tool, because anything you click when you're in that, you start laying in more faces, and it's sort of a nuisance. Right click on this, take it back to object mode, and if I hit 3, we have much more definition on top. So now you look at this and you're like, I can see it. Now we've tightened up these highlights in here, with definitely looking smoother. Got a bit of a nice rounded edge on that. And this next edge loop, maybe it adds something to it, maybe it doesn't. I'm just going to add something, use another cut face and basically cut across the length of this and just see what it looks like. I could just loop the interiors here, but I'm just going to add it across because I think it's going to, it's just a single component. It's not going to make a huge difference as far as the face count. So here we go. I'm going to go back into Maya, and I'm going to go to a side view. Alright, I just want to make sure that I'm not cutting anything that really matters, and I'm going to go into Shift, right click, cut faces, and hold down Snap, and something like that. Hit Q to get out of it, and go back to the perspective mode. So what I did was I just added in a little something here just to kind of firm up those edges. Alrighty, and let's take a look and see what that did. Yeah. Actually, I kind of like that, because now I get a much nicer highlight down here in the corner, added a little bit of definition. Alright? So that's our piece, and that might make a really nice mouth grid for your character, and that's kind of how you'd go about doing it. If you wanted the edges softer, you could pull out those edge loops there. A lot of options. Matter of fact, I'm missing one edge loop. Maybe I'm going to put this one in too. Let me just put one more edge loop in here. Something like this. So then the edges feel like they're getting the same treatment all the way across. So we got these little cubes all across there, and these cubes all the way across there, and at the bottom as well. So I think that's going to give us a really nice edge, and it did. So we got nice edges on the outside of that. And there you go. That's your piece. So something like that might work very well for the mouthpiece. Hopefully that was helpful. Take care, guys.